There are several countries that we call socialists that this country, people like on the left, like Nancy Pelosi, the establishment Democrats, and the Republicans have made fun of these countries as communists. We get mocked as being commies and socialists, and just how, look at socialism. You don't have anything on the shelves and blah, blah, blah. But the reality is much different. And also the reality in how they're handling this is much, much different. So Venezuela is one of these countries. Venezuela, of course, who we pretty much tried to insist a coup upon them, is handling the situation fairly well. So they suspended rent payments, and they're protecting wages as the coronavirus cases keep rising. And
to 77.
Yeah, right.
Look.
Yeah, and so not only that they suspend the wages, or that they suspend the rent payments, they already have Medicare for all, well, universal health care. In this case, they have universal health care. People are going to get their tests. They're already getting the medicine from Cuba. And they're getting help from these countries too. And that's what we're going to talk about. I mean, the fact that Maduro said, quote, he was going to use all his power and consciousness to protect jobs and the most vulnerable in society during the quarantine lockdown. While grassroots organizations such as the Tenants Movement applauded the measure, business leaders such as Alan Sells, president of the Venezuela Industry Confederation, claimed that they fall short. So here's the thing. He's offering to pretty much what Pasta wants. Freeze all these rents, freeze all these mortgages. And that is going to help the Venezuelan people far more than what our leaders are doing.
Here's where we're at, where Nancy Pelosi and Chuck Schumer are working with the Republicans to give you bupkis, squadouche, and we're supposed to grin and bear it and be happy about it. Meanwhile, Venezuela, the country that we always seem to, demonize. You got Jack Ryan out there working with the Russians. Yeah, they're working on with the Russians to get a bomb. No, to get coronavirus kits to test. That's what they're doing.
And they have far less risk than we do. Yeah. And that's the funny part.
They're treating it seriously. 77 people, and they're shutting shit down.
And they're on sanctions, and we've tried to put a coup, install a puppet in there.
Yeah, all these things.
Juan Guaido isn't even the head of their party, and they're still they're still praising him.
Who doesn't know what sanctions means? I mean, it's like literally putting a hold on your bank account, and you're not allowed to use it, basically.
Yep. They're freezing their assets in other places. They still never got their gold back from the Western Bank in Great Britain. They are still not allowed to use money in transfers with their neighbors to buy supplies or anything else. So they're being crippled, and the sanctions always help hurt poor people. So you can imagine at a time like this with the coronavirus how hard and imposing it must be on a country like Venezuela, but yet this is why Maduro's in power. This is the reason why his people will support him, because he says he's going to protect the most vulnerable at a time in need. When they have 77 people infected, we have 77 people infected on our fucking block, and we're getting ready to send people back out to work next week. Get the fuck out of here.
They're building beds. They're focusing on the hospital, right? And there are also doing house-to-house calls, which means that they're literally going and calling every house and talking to people directly. And they are supposed to receive about 2 million diagnostic tests in the next week. So they've actually managed to keep this down pretty well.
You know why they got that? They got good elections over there. That's why. Carter Institute says one of the best elections over there. Why.
Yeah, well,
representative
that's the
of the fucking people there.
But their elections weren't valid and ours were. So the head of the,
right?
This is from Telesur. The head of the Venezuelan military has began on the ground assisting in the distribution of food boxes alongside armed forces personnel as the coronavirus quarantine continues.
Es un crimen de lesa humanidad. Los Estados Unidos pretenden.
So the United States is committing a crime. They're blocking. They're continuously blocking. Can you continue to play?
Nuestros alimentos, nuestras
our food, our supplies.
Ante eso, bueno, aquí está la revolución bolivariana y su
Here's the Bolivarian Revolution.
Los comités locales de abastecimiento y producción.
This is the food production. And yeah.
Un instrumento para proteger al pueblo. Ayer el presidente habló
This is
de
a moment to protect the people.
Medidas, hay que prestarle atención. Mucha atención, pero siempre va a estar la protección del pueblo. Y esta es una manera de hacerlo.
This is a way of protecting the people.
Haciendo en coordinación con el Ministerio de Alimentación en el marco de la gran misión Abastecimiento Soberano. Aquí está el comandante de la SODI Capital. Y
esta talking about that we're here the sovereignty of the people and the effort.
Cajas Club van aquí a atender a 100 familias.
These people are going to go attend to 100 families.
La comunidad del Valle, 100 familias. Es la solidaridad de la Fuerza Armada.
It's the solidarity of the armed forces.
Militar. Solidaridad, solidaridad y más solidaridad. Unidos venceremos.
More solidarity, and together we will defeat this. Meanwhile, people are like price gouging necessary items in America because of capitalism. So terrible Venezuelans. I mean, they're horrible.
Awful.
This one's even worse because there's just a bunch of commies there in Cuba. Cubans are, we've sanctioned them. We've put an illegal embargo on them for years. But they managed to do really well. And one of the things they managed to do well is develop a really strong medical field. And their doctors are doing amazing things, not only in Italy, but they're going across Europe. And we might need them over here, to be honest, considering doctors arrive in Italy to help combat the coronavirus pandemic.
The Cuban doctors are already with our doctors here in the hospital. They came here to help the Italian population in the COVID-19 related pandemic. As the situation is very difficult in Italy, we came with 50 specialized doctors. As the army prepares the makeshift medical facilities in China, the Italian doctors are holding meetings with their Cuban colleagues. The Cuban doctors are already with our doctors here in the hospital. This is in Italy. They have introduced to the patient registration procedure and how to get around the hospital. So they already understand their settings. China and Russia are also sending medical staff to Bergamo, a hotspot for COVID-19 in Italy.
The whole point of that is that these nations like Russia, like Cuba,
China
are all pretty much showing more solidarity with these countries and helping out and handling this situation much better than we are. And of course, the mainstream media isn't talking about it. The mainstream media is just alarming people and really providing zero solutions and no information. But we need to see how these other countries are handling this, because it's telling us how we should be acting. Another thing that Cuba is doing is, of course, sending their doctors. And Camila from Telesur is, Cuba has a team of nurses, doctors, and lab technicians who will arrive tomorrow at the small Caribbean island of Dominica. A lot of people haven't been paying attention to Dominica, and they're going to provide this sort of expertise in handling the coronavirus. And they've already had 7 cases of COVID-19 and an island with a population of 70,000. So the problem with these small little islands, countries, is that even if we have the same amount of people infected, it's worse for them because they're in a smaller area. That's why you see a lot of infections in New York, because people are so close to each other there that it's like impossible to isolate yourself. If you live next to somebody in an apartment, you're going to see them at any way possible. And like a lot of New York, again, wasn't really taking things seriously up until the last minute. So
I got to say, this next thing you have up here from Redfish is amazing, fam.
Upon our request, the government of the Republic of Cuba will be sending 25 nurses, 6 doctors, and 4 lab technicians to assist with our efforts. They will arrive on our island this Thursday. We will do all in our power to minimize the spread of this virus and to attend to the needs of those who have contracted the virus. Our healthcare officials are motivated and are up to the task. This is their area of specialty, and we shall take our cue from them. Whatever reinforcements they require, we shall endeavor to provide.
Now in Cuba, I've always liked and been intrigued by this, because my friend who's been to Cuba many times says, Pasta, there's so many people who are like, they have 2 different, forms of education. They're being educated as a doctor, but they're also working as a cab driver. In other words, they teach a lot of people. They have a lot of people have, a lot of education there. And, that's when Bernie Sanders got in trouble for trying to talk about the education, which I think he should have been like, F you, Cuba's doing really good. Well, Cuban medical students have been trained and sent by the government to work as preventative force against the coronavirus. They're going door to door across Cuba, reporting, isolating, treating cases of those experiencing symptoms of the COVID-19 to prevent the spread early on. This is amazing. Like, if we didn't hoard our education and make it so hard for some people to become doctors and give them information, it's about information, right, fam?
Right.
It's hoarding information. Well, if we were to educate our society to be doctors and, lawyers and other things as well, and not make it crippling for them and put them into debt and society as slaves, then we can do something like this. We can have citizens who are citizen doctors who are out there looking, helping, finding. What they're doing in Cuba right now is amazing. And we need to look at it right now. We need to see it. And people have to understand that socialism isn't necessarily that bad. It has a lot of good.
Bad at all.
It's got a lot of great things about it. I think it all boils down to leadership. And people always want to chastise, what's his name, Castro, and say he was awful. But look at the society he's built. And I'm not saying the man hasn't done awful things. I'm sure he does. All leaders have to do awful things. But look at the society he's built, where he's got students, medical students, going out and acting as an army of doctors to help the spread. That is amazing.
Well, yeah. And also, as the medical field goes, in the United States, being a doctor is a very difficult thing to do. You have to take out $300,000 in student loans. And then you have to, go through a process of 10 years at least to become a doctor. And it's just a lot of hoops. And they made it more accessible and found a way to make it more attainable in Cuba. And it's not as elitist. The doctors are more up until a certain point, and some people who, some of our progressive doctors that actually care about providing Medicare for all, up until a certain point, they're of a certain class that has benefited from, obviously, the income inequality and the insurance companies. And I think we could learn something from Cuba, not necessarily saying that what doctors do isn't valuable, but it shouldn't just be valued by money. I mean, if we were going to value that, we should pay teachers almost as much as we pay doctors, right? And that's something that I think that we could learn from Cuba. They've had so much advancement in the medical field that we haven't even talked about, like cancer treatments. And they were forced to do this because we pretty much made it impossible for them to go anywhere else.
Yeah.
So Russia, of course, is the third country we're going to talk about, because Russia has been vilified, of course, since McCarthyism of the 1950s, and of course through Russiagate, revamped entirely for the century. And we need to fight against that as well. But the reality is, Russia may have problems with Putin as a leader. He may not be somebody that we agree with all the time. He may be authoritarian in a lot of senses. But the reality is, Russia is another nation that's handling this really well, and they are doing so much for other people as well.
Journalists, what do you think the aid that came from Italy, from countries like China, Russia, Cuba, are they welcome in hand? For me, yes, it's a welcome hand, because Italy has been left alone for me. They did good. It is right to help each other in this instance. I'm sorry, I'm trying to glare. We'll be ready to help other countries when the need arises. We too will be ready to help other countries when the need arises. Aid is starting to arrive, but maybe it began arriving a bit late. This is a Milan resident. If it had started arriving weeks earlier, we may have begun seeing results by now. It has, of course, been missing. When Germany and France need help, we're always there for them. When it's the opposite, not so much. Where's the EU? Yes, it has. Non-European aid has been greater. The EU, with all their fucking austerity measures and the way they fucking put people in austerity, while Italy said, fuck you, okay, but here we go. Now we have a situation where we have a pandemic, and there's no help from the EU.
Right.
The help's coming from China, Russia, Cuba.
Yeah. And that's the thing.
Right.
Everything's coming out. Everything's falling apart. And the fictitious, they're evil and we're just so innocent theater that they've put out, that this country and, of course, the Western part of Europe has put out, is being proven to be false. And we just have to pay attention and not buy this media narrative that these people are evil, when look at how they're handling the situation far, far better than how we are. So there's also this drone footage of Russia, because guess what Russia's doing? They're building new hospitals. And that's something we're not even doing. We're pretty much struggling on that right now. And yeah, they're just building new hospitals in Russia.
What? Oh, no, it's Glakostavo, Russia. But what we're seeing is they're doing construction of a new hospital for coronavirus. They're taking it serious. There's construction's going up quick. It's going up fast. They're going to contain it.
And Russia is also helping. This is from Gloria Jones. She said they sent medical equipment over to Italy, effectively helping them more than NATO and the EU, as what we just said, which allegedly tried to block some of the shipments when going through Poland. So, because the EU, this is a classic response of the establishment. They don't want to look bad. They don't want to look like, they're completely inept, which they are. So they're going to, instead of helping them, block the shipments of help just because they're getting help from the other side, the East, from the enemies.
This sums it up right here. So, grazie, Russia. And it's a man who has an Italian flag and an EU flag. He's rolling it up, the EU flag. He's rolling it up, and you hear this beautiful Italian music going.
Sounds British.
Okay, now he puts it down. Thumbs down for the EU flag, and he brings it inside. And now he grabs something, and he's coming out. What's it? Cue the Russian music. And he has a sign that says, Grazie Putin, grazie Russia. And he has a Russian flag in his hand, and he puts it near the Italian flag.
Oh, God.
You know what? I always say that I want to go to Italy. I can't wait until they get things under control over there.
Well,
because I'd like to go to Italy and Russia. Those are the two places I want to go to first.
You would?
Yeah, I do. I want to go see Russia. I want to see what it's all about. I mean, Italy, because that's my homeland, obviously, and
Yeah, right.
Watch it fail.
I've been to Italy. It's beautiful.
I know. Everybody says it's the best place to go to.
It's really, really beautiful. Lots of wine. But this is funny because it's just blatant. And I wish we could show that video like on CNN, just hack it and just show like how inept the West has been in dealing with the coronavirus, because it's an international thing of how the West has handled it versus how places like China, Russia, Cuba are handling it, how they're putting us all to shame. And it's funny that the United States and the Western empires don't want this to be seen. And Boris Johnson isn't handling things well either. So this is a Western issue. And I think there's so much that we could learn from these countries.
Bojo.